Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Shane Beamer, South Carolina. Things need to change, and things need to change really damn quickly if South Carolina is going to get the train back on the tracks. And here's the one positive before we get into a really negative episode around this program. The one positive is you got the pieces on the offensive side of the football, and there is zero question about it. I'm a Michigan fan, and Michigan had big struggles on offense in 2024. We did not have correctable things. We just didn't have players. You can't just snap your fingers and have better football players as the season goes on. Look at South Carolina and say you got a quarterback that has the opportunity to be one of the best players in the country. You got a wide receiver, Nick Harbor. Really, let's just say it. Like, Nick Harbor needs more opportunities. He has shown us that he can be a wide receiver one in this conference. You got a ton of young wide receivers that we know can play as well. I'll look at a running back like Rasul Faison and say, I know the version of Rasul Faison that we saw at Utah State is still in Rasul Faison at South Carolina. Hell, I'll even look at the offensive line. The offensive line has young talent. It has some veteran pieces as well. It has guys that we've seen play good football at times, but this unit has not come together. It's some of the more sloppy offensive line play that you'll see in the entire country. But I think your five guys that you're trotting out there, I think have the opportunity to be good. You just have not seen it in 2025. The most frustrating part about South Carolina to start the season is that the things about this football team that we had the most confidence in, those are the things that are letting us down. Like, to the South Carolina fans that were rocking with the boys all off season long, we spent so much time talking about the question marks on the defensive line, talking about the question marks at the linebacker position. We're just fine at those positions. In fact, I'll go out and say some of the best football players through 3 games reside in those position rooms. We got the pieces to get the train back on the tracks, but there are things that need to change, and that's what we're going to talk about over the next 10 to 15 minutes. Before we get into it, as always, the South Carolina fans, number one, I do want to give a massive thank you. This team, at least for myself, has been very fun to talk about. And it's been, quite frankly, hard not to root for because of all the support that this fan base has shown the boys through the highs and lows. Y'all been amazing. Appreciate you guys. These are not the kind of episodes I love doing, but you got to do them when it happens. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. More importantly, if you just want to sound off in the comment section, go right ahead. We'll be chopping it up down there. Without further ado, you got to point to what I think is the most glaring problem, and is that Mike Shula, this offensive play calling, it's been a disaster is probably the best way. And look, I was very hesitant to jump down Mike Shula's throat early. Say first couple of games, kind of getting his feet wet, calling plays for LaNorris Sellers. I get it. Well, now we're through 3 games, and some of those problems should have been ironed out against Virginia Tech, against South Carolina State, and it ain't, right? And here's my biggest problem is we can only score points on scripted plays. Like, the 2 best drives that South Carolina has had all year came the first drive of the year against Virginia Tech and that first drive against Vanderbilt in week 3. Both scripted drives with a set call to play, or set plays that you were going to run opening up those football games. When we are not working off the scripted plays, this offense is a disaster. And look, to me, it starts with this. I don't know what the identity of this South Carolina offense is. And the second part about it is we are not leaning into the strengths of this South Carolina offense. I'm looking at it and say, hey, LaNorris Sellers, we knew this because this is what he was last year. LaNorris Sellers has been elite pushing the ball down the field to start 2025. He's 3 of 4. Now, the problem is 3 of 4, 75% completion percentage, 20 plus yards down the field. I love that number. The big problem is he's only done it 4 times. I mean, you're having a ton of success attacking the deeper third. You have a wide receiver that might be the best vertical threat that you see in the entire country in Nick Harbor. You have a quarterback that is very clearly comfortable pushing the ball down the field, yet we're not doing it. One of the biggest roles that an offensive coordinator can play is leaning in to the skill sets of his football players. You very clearly have something that works. It has worked in the select times you've decided to go to it. You just haven't gone to it all that often. The fact that they've had this much success pushing the ball down the field, but are barely doing it, to me, that's a problem. The second problem is we are very vanilla with our run game. Like, go look at Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt has a very dynamic, athletic quarterback too in Diego Pavia, and they run the football in ways that South Carolina hasn't even dreamt of doing. Right? They are tapping into Diego Pavia's athleticism. They are tapping into the skill sets of their running backs, and they have created a rushing attack that is one of the more dynamic and diverse that you see in the country. I'm not saying South Carolina has to adopt Vanderbilt's offense because I think LaNorris Sellers is a little bit more capable of a thrower than Diego is. Why not start using a little bit more option plays? You have the quarterback to do it. You have the running back to do it. Why aren't we getting more dynamic and more multiple with how we can run the football? Because you have the skill set to do it, and we're just not doing it. And now we're struggling to run the football. We're finding ourselves behind the chains far too often in these third and obvious passing situations, and our offensive line has just not picked up blitz packages. And we'll talk about that in a second. Last thing I'll say, there is not a single player that has over 50 yards after the catch on the year. That's a problem. That is one of the first things I look at when I'm evaluating an offensive coordinator. If you're a good offensive coordinator, you find ways to get your playmakers the football in space. The fact that we are just not a factor in terms of yards after the catch, it's a direct correlate, or it shines the light on the struggles we are having as an offensive play caller, because you're not getting your guys the football in space. You're not giving them opportunities to operate with the ball in space. And look, that is a fundamental part of almost every single good offense that you see in the country. You're outside of the top 100 in 20-plus yard plays. It's inexcusable. When you have a quarterback like LaNorris Sellers, who's one of the most explosive quarterbacks in the sport, when you have a guy like Nick Harbaugh at wide receiver, when you have a running back like Rasul Faison, in no world should this South Carolina football team be outside of the top 100 when it comes to manufacturing explosive plays. It's all been a problem. We're not efficient. We're not explosive. We don't really have an identity. And then lastly, the positive, the skill sets that we like on this football team on offense, they're not getting utilized. Do you make the change this early? I think you at least have to think about it, because it's been such a problem through the first 3 games, and it hasn't really gotten better. The other problem, the offensive line, Lonnie Teasley, right? And here's the thing is, I'll say this. That was probably the best offensive line performance we've seen all year against Vanderbilt. That's not necessarily a good thing, because I don't think the offensive line was all that good, but it was probably the best we've seen this unit look. And here's the frustrating part is you start looking at the starting 5 you have and say, we've seen Josiah Thompson play like he's going to be a future NFL guy. We've seen good football play from Casey Henry. I thought Tree looked all right when he came into that football game. Trevon Baugh has been very good. Shad Surratt's a freshman that can move some bodies off the line of scrimmage. My biggest problem with this offensive line is that individually, I think you have good football players. Individually, it should not be a problem. But collectively, this offensive line has been a monster problem. And I look at it and say, well, something's not, they ain't coming together. And where do we point the finger? And I don't like pointing the finger, but where do we point the finger when we think we have talent, but it ain't coming together? Probably the coaching. And here's the other thing. I mean, the play that LaNorris Sellers got his clock cleaned and got hurt. I mean, that was a very basic simulated pressure. Where they drop out a defensive lineman, they send an off-ball line, but they only brought 4. And we just didn't pick up that second-level blitzer. Runs free to LaNorris Sellers, and LaNorris Sellers gets smoked. It's like basic blitz pickup stuff that we ain't doing right. Offensive line play calling, those are probably the 2 things that are the biggest factors in South Carolina struggle. And I'll say this, 2 big moment success, right? I mean, we did not get off the field at all on third downs. I thought South Carolina did a really good job getting Vanderbilt behind the chains. A lot of 3rd and 7s, a lot of 3rd and longs, putting Vanderbilt in uncomfortable spots when it was time to make plays. and get off the field, we just weren't doing it, right? And Vanderbilt was staying on the football field, using all the play clock and just kind of sitting on that football game. And then on the offensive side of the football, when we do move the football, when we get into the red zone, we ain't scoring enough touchdowns and we're not converting on third downs and we're taking negative plays. This team last year, when it came to making plays to win the game, and that's just how it's going to look in the SEC, right? Like there are going to be select plays where you need to show up and make plays if you want to win games in this conference. That goes for every team in the conference. We're just not making those plays right now. Where do we go from here? I mean, again, the positive, circling back to the positive, is that I think you have the pieces to get this thing back on track, right? And we've seen historically these South Carolina teams thrive as the season goes on and get better as the season goes on. You need that to happen. If South Carolina continues to play the way they're playing right now, you're looking at 6-6 at best. And we know this team is capable of 9-3, 10-2. We know that for a fact. You just got to start playing football the way we know South Carolina can play. Those are my takes. I look at it and say you can kind of boil it down to we got to get this South Carolina offense in rhythm. We got to start leaning into the strengths that this South Carolina offense has that is directly on Mike Shula's shoulders. And this offensive line's got to come together. You know, one of the reasons I believed in South Carolina in 2025 is I thought this offensive line could be a strength. It's been far from that. I still think they have the ability. I don't know if I'll say it can be a strength right now, but I think it can be just fine. But it's got to come together. Those are what I'm looking at for South Carolina. I apologize that look, you think these episodes ain't fun for me either. Those are the problems we got to fix. And again, I think you have the pieces to fix them. Like you got the guys. Go out and make it happen. And if you don't, things are going to get really noisy within the South Carolina fan base, and I don't blame any South Carolina fans for that either. Appreciate you guys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We'll talk to y'all later. Peace.